lucky to have some fantastic ladies speaking today. I will let them introduce themselves. Valerie, let's start with you.
So my name is Valerie Volz, and I'm the Director of Professional Development for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce in the Adult Education Division.
Thank you. And then next we have Amanda.
Hey everybody, I'm Amanda Keller in East Tennessee. I work with TCAT Knoxville Adult Education.
Awesome. And I'm Jocelyn Vines. I work with Engage by Cell. I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I recently attended this year's COABE conference and have since been chatting with a lot of adult education professionals. And I'm looking forward to chatting more today about how our services benefit these types of programs. Brittany, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Brittany Lawson. I'm also with Engage by Cell. I had the pleasure of meeting Valerie about this time last year. She introduced me to a lot of folks in adult education in Tennessee that she works with. And since then, we've really expanded across the country, and I've been working closely with a lot of adult education and just youth education too, as well, folks across the country to talk about our services. So happy to be here. Let's go ahead and kick off by telling you a little bit about Engage by Cell. But actually, before we do that, why don't we take a look at those poll results too? Anna, do we have those? Great. Okay, so looks like email with 88%. That looks like the most popular. And then in person, some text messaging and phone calls. Okay, great. Yep, that's kind of what we expected. Email is very popular, but more and more as we communicate with folks, we find that emails can go missed, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Valerie and Amanda have their own experiences with how email works, and in some cases where there's better alternatives, and that's where we come in. But with Engage by Cell, of course, we offer some text messaging and some other engagement tools. We're cloud-based. We've been around for 17 years. We've got a lot of different services, and we work really closely with a lot of workforce development, adult ed, and youth programs. So, and that's how we met Valerie. She found us and loved some of the things we were providing and saw a vision for the use. Valerie, I'll go ahead and let you tell a little bit about, how you came across us and what your vision was for how you'd utilize these tools.
So my manager actually recognized you or saw you at a conference, and we got connected really at a conference. And we were looking at a way to impact retention, because in our programs, we really haven't gotten anything that we can reach out to students who just suddenly drop and are no longer there. We can't have them check their emails. A lot of times they may not check it, but once a month, or if at all. Maybe they just did the email to sign up with us. But really making that connection, learning about the services, seeing the demos, playing with the product myself. And I was bought in, from the get-go, because I was able to see the impact it could have on those retention rates and meeting those students where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can be a big challenge with adult education, right? Because those folks are busy and have a lot going on, more than maybe the average student that doesn't quite have a family yet and things like that. So they're real busy folks. Great.
Yeah, and Amanda, if you could talk a little bit about TCAT and your audience there.
Sure. We learned about this product from Valerie, and we did sort of a pilot to see how we could use the product and what impact it could have. We have 7 counties in our district. Knox is by far the largest, but we have several large counties, and we have classes all across those counties. So one of the things that we were struggling with was being able to communicate with all students. And in my experience, a lot of students don't check email. Some of them don't even have email. And one of the biggest issues for us is that a lot of students don't have computers. They're doing these things on their cell phones. So we had to have something that was user-friendly for the student and that they could access easily on their cell phones. So we started using the product, and I'll tell you a little bit later how we do that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And we've got a QR code there too that you can scan if you'd like, and you can view what Amanda and her team have kind of built that showcases each of the different counties they work with. So it's got some nice information on there. Used as kind of a resource portal, right, Amanda?
Yes, we
Okay.
have an administrator who manages the site for us, and it is a big job to do all of the things that she does. But the things you see there with that QR code are her work, and students are linked to every county. We even have a virtual program they can access. So this is a gateway for our students to onboard with us. If they Google us and find us in a search, TCAT Knoxville, they can follow links to get to this QR code.
Awesome. Great. So I guess that kind of leads me to this next question here. What are some of the obstacles that you have been running into and your team have been running into when it comes to student engagement? Amanda, why don't we hear from you a little bit about that?
Yes, ma'am. For us, the issues are the same, I think, the county, the state, the country over. Students who are adults have barriers. They have transportation, childcare, all of those things that we all know as adult ed practitioners. So that's one of the things that keep our students from engaging on a regular basis. And when I say engaging, I'm not necessarily just talking about coming to class. I believe if we can keep students engaged all the time, we have a much better chance of retaining them. We can, if they're in class every day, it's pretty easy to retain them. But when we don't see them every day, or sometimes only once a week, we kind of lose that contact. I think before COVID, we had a much better relationship with students, at least in my personal perspective. But this is a way that we can stay engaged outside of the classroom.
Sure.
Valerie, would you say that that's kind of some of the same feedback you've been hearing from the other folks at other schools?
It is. And that was really the goal. The main goal that we had was a way to connect to those students once they're no longer in our programs, when they drop out before they've actually obtained their high school equivalency. And this gave us an opportunity to connect with them, but also it gave us a way to connect with them when they do have those barriers. Maybe they only do have that cell phone. And this product works so well on the cell phone that it can substitute for that computer, as needed, dependent upon how the teachers design the product.
Okay. And before using like text messaging to reach those students, what was the best way to reach somebody that maybe just kind of dropped out of the blue?
Phone call.
Yeah.
Phone call or emails were the main routes and main avenues. We did use a couple of programs. Some of our instructors would use the Google products, and then some did use the Remind Me. That was something that was pushed across the state several years ago. But still, students weren't getting the messages, the notifications, and the information that they really needed that way.
Yeah, I think some of those services you heard about at COABE, right, Jocelyn? That was the conference you were at.
Yeah, I did. And I actually heard from many teachers who expressed frustrations with giving out their personal phone number and getting text messages and phone calls on, the weekends and late at night and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually just talked to someone the other week too, that a lot of their staff uses their personal phones and they're happy to do it, which is great. I actually don't know a ton of people that would necessarily be happy to do that, but they have some staff that are happy to do that. But on the flip side of that is that, their supervisors don't have access to their personal phone records to see that back and forth communication and just make sure that everything is, looking good and, just help support them. So it's good to have, a record of those conversations. So you can go back and you can have assistance. Maybe you go on vacation even. It's something as simple as that. you might want a colleague to be able to go and see, okay, what was the last conversation like with this student? Because we haven't heard from them since she left on vacation. So yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that we offer with our text messaging service, and, text messaging platforms in general. They can offer the basics of sending a text. But what else can they offer as far as like features and things go? And those were some of the things that y'all loved about our services, if I remember right. Having the ability to see all those records and see the back and forth communication. So a little bit about what a text messaging platform is about and how it's different from just sending a text from your phone like you do your family members or your colleagues or your friends. What we do is we build a strong communication and relationship with the carriers. So the carriers are really the ones that, approve organizations to be able to send some mass messaging. So if you have a list of like 20 students, or you've got a whole school of 150 or so, to be able to send just, one message and a couple clicks to that whole group, you've got to have some approval from the carriers for that. So we make sure that we help you get set up with that 10-digit phone number that's specific to your organization. So you can do that. You get your campaign approved through the carriers. So whether you're using it for recruitment or just general engagement throughout the year, fundraising events, things like that, they'll approve those campaigns. But in our platform, you also have that 24/7 access to the dashboard, which allows you to see your whole list of everybody. You can assign them by, of course, not just their name, but the location, the program they're interested in, or the program they're enrolled in, and all these fun details to help organize your list a little bit better. But yeah, of course, and then you can see the reports. Send one text to one person or one to many people in the list. So there's a lot of cool features. With that, you ladies mentioned Remind and Google services. Here's a little breakdown of how our text messaging service compares a little bit to some of those services that you're familiar with and some of the people here on the webinar today might have heard of before too. So you'll see there's some things that we definitely offer that those other tools don't necessarily have. So just something to consider. All right, awesome. So we talked about this a little bit too. How are you communicating with students before text messaging? Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit further, Amanda. I think you said something about in person too. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you were communicating with students?
Yes, ma'am. I would say in any way possible.
Yeah.
We were doing everything we could think of. We were relying heavily on in-person communication, phone calls, but a lot of times if students don't recognize the number, they won't answer the phone. Emails, we use that, but a lot of students don't have emails. Snail mail, I have even resorted to that, or making packets and delivering them myself when I had large groups of students, especially during the pandemic. We had to resort to ways that were just not the traditional thing. So to answer this question, I would say in any way I possibly could. But I think hands down, the easiest way now is by text message. They will respond to that better than anything I've found. So before text messaging became a thing, communication was a lot harder for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I actually have a little bit of a background with education. I used to work for a trade school, and it was during COVID too. And we were doing that. I mean, we had a lot of hands-on students, and it was tough to communicate with those folks and get what they needed to them. So yeah, we were doing door drop-off stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's needed. And sorry, go ahead.
To hospital rooms, I had a student who had a knee replacement, and she so desperately wanted to stay in the loop. So anything that we could do to keep that communication, that's the key to retention, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that kind of brings me back to the mobile web app too, which I know, Jocelyn, I think you were going to talk about a little bit, and how that's a really cool tool to be able to just send them directly, something that they need. You could build it and send it straight to them, so they don't have to go searching too hard.
Yeah. So diving into mobile web apps, I know we're all familiar with the millions of apps we all have downloaded on our phones. Mobile web apps, or what we sometimes call MOBIs, are different in the sense they're all cloud-based, meaning there's no downloading required. So mobile web app isn't taking up your data, and there's no room. There's going to be room for your favorite or your student's favorite apps. You can also bookmark it as a shortcut on your home screen, so it looks and feels like a native app. And they're super easy to create. Our platform uses a drag and drop builder. We can add polls, audio, links to existing resources, really whatever you need. So yeah, essentially it's a build your own resource portal that you have 24/7 access to and complete ownership of. So no reaching out to IT, and any edits you need to make will go live instantly. There is a top QR code on the top right. Feel free to scan that on your phone to check out one of our clients' web apps, to check out what they've got going on.
Yeah, theirs looks a little bit different from TCAT Knoxville. So it just kind of gives you an idea too of a bunch of different ways that you can use this, the different looks and feel. So, I mean, you can make it, match your branding, and really it can be whatever you think the most pertinent information is going to be. You just want to make it, a great resource for your students. So whatever you can do in adult education to make things easier for those students, so you can keep that engagement, is a good thing. There is a Q&A question that I wanted to answer real quick before we move on.
Sure.
Looks like Jennifer was asking, do students have the option to text individual teachers, or is there one text messaging number for the whole site? That's a great question. You can do that either way. So if you have a very, very small organization, you could just have one number that you're communicating with your students with. But I know that there's actually a Tennessee school that has many different numbers. And that's because they want to organize things a little bit deeper. They've got a lot of students, and the teachers want to be able to have their own individual list, and they only want to see their list. They don't want to see my list or Jocelyn's list or anybody else, all the other teachers' lists. They just want to see theirs and their conversations. So they all have different phone numbers. Great question. You have the option for both.
So how did students access materials before Engage by Cell? I know we kind of touched on that earlier, but Amanda, how were people getting surveys, polls, or any kind of materials for the mobile web app?
I would say in this case, they either weren't or they were getting them in a face-to-face environment. They would pick them up, not necessarily in class, but they may stop by to pick things up. They may, we mailed a lot of things just by snail mail. I tried email, but that wasn't, it was okay if they could access the content directly on that screen. But if they had to scan something back to me or upload something, it didn't work well at all. So I would say, honestly, they weren't always getting the materials before we had this option.
Sure. And like Brittany was saying, I'm sure these folks are super busy. So having physical pieces of paper, I'm sure probably gets lost pretty easily.
Yes. And I just pulled our numbers here. We have 1,160 students in our district right now. So I anticipate at least 1,500 by the end of this school year. So we're managing a huge district with a lot of students. Some of them are not even coming for high school diploma. They're here with IETs, or they're here for different reasons. So a program this size needs the ability to customize. One size does not fit all for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's part of what drew Valerie to us too. Valerie, do you want to speak a little bit to that? Because I know you've had some fun in that mobile web app too.
I have. I've enjoyed the mobile web app. And yes, it is customizable. So dependent upon what your student needs are, you can create those polls and those surveys. And I was watching the little demo that she had built. It is as easy as dragging and dropping the components in to build what you need. Before, our students, and now still, use Schoology as our distance education tool or resource. but many students don't find the access as easy as what something that's actually designed for a mobile phone, is. Um, I think that's what drew me to it more than anything, that it is specific to a mobile phone. And since so many of our students need that component, that ability to customize it to meet that student need, that end user need, was really critical for us.
Definitely. Well, and I know too, some of the websites can be a little overwhelming. I'm
Mhm.
sure each school is a little bit different, but sometimes if it's something as simple as, oh my gosh, I got a new phone and I lost my instructor's phone number. How do I find their number again? I can't get logged into my email trying to navigate a website to find it. Okay, well, maybe you can get back to that mobile web app because you've got it saved, or you've got it on a flyer, because there's still going to be a need for some of that, those flyers and in-person things. At orientation, maybe you'll still hand out that flyer that's got the QR code and they can pull that back out, scan it and pull it up, and you've got your contact information right there. So yeah, and with websites, you've got to go through IT and, get those approvals to make changes. And if for some weird reason they were able to let you do it, well, then you got to know how to code, and you just avoid all that with a tool like ours. Just drag and drop. It is easy and fun, like you were saying, Valerie.
And I think one critical point that needs to be made here, there is a difference in just disseminating information to people and actually having them respond to you. Schoology, I love Schoology. It's one of my favorite things, but it's hard for some students, especially those who aren't tech savvy or who really aren't good readers. It's hard for them to know how to respond to me. They can look at the content, get to it just fine, but when it comes to actually engaging with the content, it's a lot harder to do that on most apps. But this one, they can just type in the answer and that connection is made.
Oh yeah, for sure. The comment board feature in our mobile web app is really cool. Yeah, if you had like a little video or a little snippet of a chapter for somebody to read and then have them comment, so you can see that engagement. They can engage with each other too. It's pretty neat. Great. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys decided to roll out the services. So, of course, your students were familiar with a certain way of being contacted by you. How were you able to initiate and roll out text messaging and mobile web apps to them? Amanda, if you want to start, that'd be great.
One of the things we did first and foremost was to appoint an administrator over this program. And as I mentioned earlier, she manages everything about the program. If our teachers need to send out a blast email, a blast anything, it goes to that administrator and she makes sure that it's proofread, it's ready to go out to students. She does emailing and texting students monthly with a newsletter for our district program. We started using this system for follow-ups so that we can track students once they leave the program and what they're doing to make sure that we're making our national percentages that we need. Our career coaches use this system to contact students who maybe don't even need a diploma. So we tried to roll this out to different groups of students in different ways. Our administrator made a link for each county so that we can use it as a marketing tool. I would say that because we're such a large program and we have such different groups of students, that you can customize this program to meet all of those needs. So as far as rolling it out, I think that would depend on the actual program that we're rolling it out to.
That makes sense. Valerie, do you have any insight on what some of the other programs in Tennessee have been doing?
Yes. When we initially rolled it out in Tennessee, I did want to start with a pilot program, and I asked several different different administrations to join us. So I had two very large groups, TCAT Knox, Amanda's being one of them, and then I invited a smaller group. And what we found is the smaller group, it was easier just to, you know, have the students join right in the classrooms, because a lot of times it was the teacher and one student or two students. So the classes were smaller, and they would join just via that number. And so they would immediately start getting the texts and things. But I do encourage anybody who wants to look at the services to utilize the pilot option so that they can, as they're going through the pilot, determine what services are most beneficial and the things that are most needed throughout the process.
Yeah, and there's a survey feature too that I think we mentioned a little bit as well. So yeah, getting that feedback directly from those folks to say, hey, what did you find most useful through this? Yeah, yeah, that's great feedback to get.
One of the things do
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We have our students in orientation to scan those QR codes so that they have that link in their phones and they know how to access that again, as you mentioned before. Having something to go back to is a very good thing. We also, our administrator made some cards similar to that one there on the right, and we use those in place of flyers. We leave them at places that have invited us to leave materials, and we get some phone calls from those students, find them, scan them, and they're in touch with us to get into orientation.
Yeah, these are great. The one on the left, if you scan that, and the folks in the webinar, you guys can scan that too if you want to see how it works, but that populates a text message. So that makes, joining the list super easy. You don't have to try and figure out what's the number, where do I put that? What's the word that I'm texting? It does that for you. So all you have to do is hit send, and then you're in the list. You'll get an automatic reply. And then the one on the right takes you to, I believe, Amanda's mobile web app. So you can scan that. And another thing you can do, just like your favorite websites, you save it to your phone's home screen. So it sits on your phone and just lives as if it's a native app. So it's pretty cool. And then you can always access it. I know that a lot of our other clients really love using these QR codes for marketing materials and things like that too. Like, we work with a lot of organizations that have virtual tours and things, and they'll print it out on stickers and put it around town, or have flyers. I think Anna on our marketing team was telling me that someone even printed them out and put them on candy wrappers and passed them out, or had them like in their office at work. Pretty sweet. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, there's a million ways that you could utilize this stuff to get the word out that it's available to your audience. So we do have another question in the Q&A I'd like to answer real quick. Is there training provided with this program? Yes, there is. So that's part of rolling it out too. Of course, we would have a little meeting with you and learn a little bit more about your use case, show you how it all works. And once you decide to move forward with us, yeah, we've got some great training, unlimited training and support. That's something we pride ourselves on as our customer service. I think we had several meetings with you, Amanda, and some of the folks on your team, just to get people in the loop so that everyone feels comfortable using it.
It was very valuable training. It definitely helped us.
Yeah, and it really only takes about an hour to learn how to use the service. So yeah, but then you can always reach out if you need help, or you have someone new that's going to join the team and take over. We can train them too. Awesome.
All right. Looks like we've got one last question for you ladies today. Valerie, we'll start with you. Yeah, describe your success. Were there any unexpected advantages or any feedback that you'd like to share?
I think just the fact that it being so accessible on the mobile phone. Students are so used to having to go to a web page, and even as Amanda spoke to earlier, if they had to go into Schoology, there, it was skewed, or they may not have their logins and all the things. This was just so easy to use and so accessible that it made a huge difference for those students who did access it. And then when you think about the teachers, knowing that they could create entire courses and content and ask polls and do all the things through this app, and it would make a huge difference in those students who had to access classes virtually.
Sure.
It made it an easy access for those students that needed to do it virtually. So just, I think the ease of use really surprised me. And I think it was a huge benefit overall.
Great. We love to hear that. Amanda, how about you?
Yes, two things come to mind here. I definitely agree with Valerie that it's easy to use. One of the things that we encounter a lot with students who are at lower functioning levels, some of them are very intimidated by technology. And if you put them in front of a computer, even to take their entry test with us, some of them get very nervous. But this is a non-threatening way to get them to interact with us on a digital level. And a second story that I can share with you, a teacher actually used this app to introduce her students. We require teachers to use a digital component, a digital literacy component with their lessons. And it can be very short. It doesn't have to be a huge chunk of the time, but we want that to be part of every lesson. And this was one way to do that, to just show them how to access the app through cell phones, how to access it anywhere that they need to. And that was sort of a doorway into that digital literacy world. And I think the fact that it's non-threatening, it's very much like what they're used to doing anyway on a cell phone.
Right.
So those were unexpected positives for us.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. Well, let's open it up for a Q&A. I'm sure some folks have some other questions. So if you like, you can go ahead and submit a question in the Q&A section, or you can use the chat box. We'll be checking both of them. Let's go ahead and submit any lingering questions that you might have for Jocelyn and I, or Amanda and Valerie about their experience. We'll give it just a minute here or so to see if there's any questions coming through. Okay, I do see a question about a log of text. Yeah, that's something that is a great resource in our dashboard. You can go in and see tons of reporting, and not just for text messages. You can see that the back and forth conversation like we were talking about, but on the mobile web app side of things, if you take like a link, each of those pages on your mobile web app have a link and their own specific QR code. You could take that link and text it out. And then there's reports that tell you who clicked on that link and where did they hang out on your mobile web app after that. So you can see, what are these people actually interested in? And, if you sent a small little clip of a lesson through a link through your mobile web app, did my student click on the link? Maybe they didn't reply to the text, but you can see in the report if they clicked on it. So that's still their way of showing that they're engaged. Price range for services. Yeah, we've got various different price ranges. Just kind of depends on use case and your organization size, how many students, or your audience, what the size of your audience would be, how many students you've got. We could definitely discuss that with you for sure. We'd love to chat about it and work with you so that we're in your budget.
And I do want to say that it's very customizable to meet your individual need, whatever it might be. That's what I appreciated about it as well, is that there were components that we could pick and choose and pull in and utilize.
Definitely. We've got another question here. Is there a single purchase or is there a charge for each user? So generally speaking, when it comes to the mobile web app and the text messaging, you can have as many users as you need. For instance, though, if you want to organize things further, you can have a different phone number for each teacher, or each counselor, or case manager, or whoever it might be, to organize and make sure the lists are separate and the records of text messages sent back and forth are separate from the rest of the folks. So yeah, you can have it either way. Does price change with versus without mobile app? The services generally, they can be packaged together or they can be separate. So it just kind of depends on what your use would be. we could explore that further with you and, talk about all the various different use cases. And no matter what, we'll work with you to try and make sure it's within your budget so you can roll it out for your team. Right. I think those are all the questions right now. Yeah. If you could share your email with us in the chat, then we can reach out and we can get you a quote too. Any other lingering comments that you would like to mention, Amanda or Valerie? Anything that we might not have touched on? I think we covered so much though. This is really valuable.
Not that I can think of.
Great.
Great.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Valerie and Amanda, for being our guest speakers. And hopefully we'll have a chance to connect with everybody and see if this can help your team out with engagement, better retention rates,
Yay.
and more engagement. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody.